Welcome back to another episode of the Many Faces of Cancer podcast. I am your host, Melissa Grosbo, and I have an amazing guest on today. I am speaking with Jenna Shersher. She is the founder and CEO of Twist Out Cancer. This is such a wonderful nonprofit organization, and I cannot wait for her to share all about it. She is also a wife and mother of two little girls, ages almost 9 and 3. And she lives in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia. So welcome to the show, Jenna.
Thank you so much.
I'm so glad to have you on, and I'm so excited to dive into your story. We were connected through a mutual friend, and Twist Out Cancer is so needed, and I'm so happy that you are doing all of the things. But first off, tell us a little bit about your background, and a little bit about your diagnosis, because you have had a very rare form of cancer that I had never heard of before. So I'm excited for everybody to hear more about that.
Yeah, thank you. So when I was 29 years old, I was diagnosed with Gray Zone Lymphoma, which at the time there were, I think, 200 cases worldwide. So as you can imagine, it was a pretty lonely place to be. There was no one really to connect with. And at the time, there was just a Wikipedia page that had one sentence that said, "This disease has features of Hodgkin's and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma." There was no support group. There were no people that I could actually call and say, like, so, what was the typical protocol, or how do you get through this? And so,
is that the gray zone, like in between Hodgkin's and non-Hodgkin's?
Have a legit name. Like, okay. It's in between, right? Yeah.
Is it still called that?
Yes, it is still called that. There are more of us now, but not a ton more. I mean, I started a Facebook group really early on, because that was really like the social media platform that I was solely focused on. And also, it was 13 years ago. So really that's all that existed. It was that and Twitter.
Right.
So yeah, I created a group, and now we're up to 800 people, but that includes caregivers and loved ones, in addition to people that are going through treatment or have been through treatment. And it's been really nice to sort of build that community and have that resource out there for folks, because it was something that I certainly did not have when I was going through diagnosis and treatment. But prior to my diagnosis, I mean, my background is in social work. So I got my master's at Columbia in nonprofit management, and I was working at the Anti-Defamation League at the time of my diagnosis. So really living an amazing life, to be honest. I was in Chicago. I was responsible for educating groups on global anti-Semitism and hate groups. And so I was traveling the world, leading young leadership missions to really interesting places. And what I found was that in around February, I was in Germany leading a mission, and I was exhausted in a way that I wasn't used to. Like, these trips are exhausting when you're leading 30 young people who all of a sudden are like not responsible for themselves. So, I knew it was going to be taxing, but it was taxing in a way that didn't feel normal. And then after that trip, I ended up going to visit a friend in Buenos Aires, and I just couldn't keep up. I mean, I was exhausted by 10 p.m. That's when people started having dinner there. I kind of knew in my heart of hearts that something wasn't right. And soon after that, I got home and was diagnosed with viral meningitis, ended up in the hospital, really strange symptoms. And that kind of started just like a series of symptoms that started to come up. Like, I was feverish, I was having flu-like symptoms, I started losing weight, and I was going to my doctor every couple of weeks saying, "This is what's going on." And they kept saying, "Well, there's a bad, flu season." And I knew that that wasn't right. And then finally, I ended up seeing an orthopedist, and for what they thought was nerve pain. I came into the office sort of having trouble moving my neck. They gave me a steroid. It felt better. And then a couple of days later, I was having trouble breathing. I went back to the orthopedist, and she was like, "I think we should do a scan." And that's when they found a bunch of tumors in my lungs. So it was pretty crazy, but it was also, when I think about it, it took almost 8 months from symptom to diagnosis. And it took me having
Wow.
to really advocate for myself and continue to go to doctors and say, I'm still sick. This doesn't seem like the flu. Um, it took people a long time to order blood work, to order scans, to really get a sense of what was going on. And I think that I didn't present like a typical blood cancer patient. I mean, certainly with Hodgkin's lymphoma, you see that in younger folks, but I was otherwise healthy. I had no other major health issues. I was working out regularly, just didn't add up. So I understand why they didn't see it, but it took a long time for between symptom, when the symptoms came and then when I was officially diagnosed.
Now, did you have all of these other things? Did you have viral meningitis? Did you have the flu, or were they all
I don't
just
think,
manifesting that way, but actually being the lymphoma?
yeah, I think it was lymphoma the whole time. So viral meningitis was a diagnosis by exclusion. They ended up not doing a spinal tap on
Okay.
me because I had all the symptoms, and essentially that was just to confirm it. So they told me to go home and rest. I actually had hallucinated in my apartment, and I was on the phone with a friend of mine who was also a physician, who said, you need to get to the hospital right away. He was very concerned about what was going on. So I do think my body was just like shutting down, and it wasn't surprising that the steroid helped with some of the inflammation, but that it came back, and um yeah, I was lucky in the sense that it was an aggressive cancer, but it also, over the 8-month period, I was still only diagnosed as stage 2. So it was limited to my mediastinum. So in my chest, it hadn't spread to other places. But I think we all believe that I had it for probably around a year before I was officially diagnosed. Yeah.
And I'm assuming treatment is probably similar to how they treat for Hodgkin's, non-Hodgkin's, both?
No, no. It
No?
was actually, because it was such a rare disease, they ended up overtreating my disease with a
Mm.
leukemia regimen. So initially, I was diagnosed with with Hodgkin's lymphoma. When they did the biopsy and when they looked at my age and looked at the presentation, that's what they had initially diagnosed me with. I was really adamant about going through fertility treatment. I was given the green light to do that. And so it essentially bought me another month to be able to, for them to do additional tests and for me to go through fertility treatment. And in that month period, while I was doing treatment, they ended up realizing that I didn't have Hodgkin's lymphoma. I had Gray Zone Lymphoma. So in a strange way, going through fertility treatment saved my life because I was diagnosed with the correct disease. If I had actually not done fertility treatment, I probably would have been undertreated, could have potentially relapsed. It would have been a very different scenario. So once they realized that it was this rare disease, they ended up overtreating my disease with this really hardcore leukemia regimen. And it meant that I had to be in the hospital for 6 days at a time with continuous chemotherapy. Like I was hooked up the entire time. So it was like 24 hours for 6 days. And that was brutal because, I was envisioning going to a clinic, being there for 3 hours, and then coming home to rest. Staying in a hospital and not being able to leave was a very different experience. It also weighed on me significantly, just psychologically. You feel like you're in
I bet.
jail, you can't go out. Um, so yeah, it was very different. And the impact also to, my reproductive system was different. My impact long term in terms of side effects was quite different from a Hodgkin's regimen. So it was a lot more serious, I think, than they had initially anticipated. Um, but thank goodness they hit me with the big guns, and I've been okay ever since. I'm 13 years out already.
Now, as you say you were overtreated, so is the normal treatment for this different than what you went through now?
There's no normal treatment for this
Okay.
disease because it's so rare. There's not a standard protocol for Gray Zone Lymphoma. So part of like the group that I have on Facebook is people sharing what have they recommended because there's no standard of care. So when I was diagnosed, I was treated with R-EPOC, and some of the things that they're talking about now, I've never even heard of, and people have very different treatment protocols that they're going through. So that's also one of the downsides of, having a rare diagnosis, not having a ton of research out there. Nothing about it was standardized at all. Yeah.
So you get to kind of be a guinea pig.
Yes. Yeah. Totally. And I also, in some ways, I felt like I got to write my own story as a result of that, right? Like when you only have a sentence on Wikipedia and that's all the information you're given, then there's huge opportunity for you to figure out what comes after that. So that's what I was kind of determined to do.
And how long was the treatment? You said it was 6 days at a time. So for how long?
Yeah. So I went through, I want to say it was 6 rounds of treatment. It was a 4.5-month period. And then at the very end, I came down with sepsis that nearly killed me. So that was pretty horrific. It was when, I was totally depleted. My immune system had been annihilated, and I ended up with an infection that either started in my urine or may have started with an infected port. It's unclear which direction it went in, but my port was infected. They had to urgently remove that. And I ended up in the hospital for another 7 days recovering from that.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep.
I've actually heard that from more than one person that sepsis is, I won't say it's common, but many people, especially on very intense, chemotherapy regimens, have developed sepsis, and just a additional complication, and grateful to God that they're all still here, but
Yeah.
it's very
Oh,
scary.
it is very scary. And for me, it was actually very painful. That was the piece that I was kind of surprised by. Yeah, it was way worse than childbirth. I can tell you that. It was excruciating. Yeah, but I was really lucky that, again, like I ended up, it was kind of a strange thing. I was getting ready to go back to work, like actually in person in the office. And I just came down with really terrible pain and was taken by ambulance to the hospital that was local. It wasn't the hospital where I was being treated, and they ended up transferring me there later on because they didn't have beds initially, so they couldn't get me in. It was like a whole thing. And then, I was just grateful to end up being back at Northwestern, which is where I was treated, and they were able to figure it out, but it took a while. It wasn't an overnight fix at all.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so with Gray Zone, is that similar to, Hodgkin's, that it's cured and you're done and you don't have to worry about it coming back? Or is there kind of always that possibility?
So my oncologist never used the word cure for me. So, initially I was there every 3 months getting checked. Then it was every 6, then it was every year, then it was every 2, and it kind of graduated. And then at the 10-year mark, I kind of said, I like seeing you, but you don't need to come here, which is the best. It was like, I was
Absolutely.
grateful for that. But for so long, even at the 5-year mark, he kind of said that to me, and I wasn't ready because I was so used to being so carefully monitored.
Mm-hmm.
And now, ever since COVID, I actually have not been back to see him. I tried multiple times. There were different things that happened, whether it was COVID, or whether it was like flight cancellations, because my I live in Pennsylvania and he's in Chicago, and so it's not like the easiest thing. But I have not seen him since before COVID. But I am so closely monitored by physicians here that he has said to me, the likelihood of you having this again is as likely as the average person getting it. So I'm sort of,
Which is very low.
yes, it's very low. So it's great that I can exhale now, but it's not like it's not a distant memory for me. And certainly, when I feel flu-like or feverish, I definitely start worrying about, could it be that this is coming back? And that is something that he has said, that, because I was symptomatic when I presented, that if it were to come back, I would be symptomatic. It wouldn't be like I just wake up one day and have Gray Zone. I would be feeling like garbage. So that is the story there. Yeah.
That's one of the things I say, at least with mine. My breast cancer is HER2 positive. So I'll never be able to say, I don't think that I'm cancer free,
Mm.
but my two favorite words right now are all clear. So when I go for my mammogram or go for my ultrasound and they say all clear, that's, music to my ears. So I totally, totally get that. Cause I think there's always, it's part of, I guess, being in the cancer club is there's always that little thing hanging over you that's, well, maybe.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we just do the best we can and we live our lives, the best we can to keep going and not think about that. Right.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right. So you went back to work with the Anti-Defamation League when you finished. So when did you kind of make the transition and start Twist Out Cancer?
So I would say like I started working on Twist. I mean, I was working on Twist without knowing I was working on Twist while I was sick, right? I mean, so I saw what I wished I had had while I was going through treatment. There were plenty of organizations in Chicago that were focused on research that were amazing, that are, I look at like, for example, Leukemia Lymphoma Society, which is an organization I got really involved in. They created some of the drugs that saved my life, and I felt really committed to wanting to support that for a long time. But what I found was that I apologize. Do you hear my dogs?
It's okay.
Right, crazy.
I love dogs.
I mean, I might have to send them out. Anyways, they so, you know, what I found was that, yes, there were plenty of these organizations doing research, but I felt like the actual emotional impact of a cancer diagnosis wasn't really being talked about. And the support the emotional support that I needed, I didn't find was available. And I felt also as a young adult with a rare type of cancer that there was this like real desire to retreat. It would have been much easier for me to just like hide myself under the covers and wish this away, right?
Right.
Um and I felt this inclination to not do that, even though I mean it was there. It was very powerful. It was something that I thought about a lot, but I felt that as a young adult with a rare type of cancer, I had this unique opportunity to share my story and to really try and focus on educating people on what it's like to experience this. And so what I found was that the more that I shared, the more the world really started to open up to me. And so initially what happened was I was just writing in a blog about my story, and it was a private blog, and then I turned it into a public blog because I had left some people out and had hurt people's feelings in the process, which was not what I was trying to do. So I opened it up just thinking like, it's gonna be family and friends that are reading this thing. Okay. So yeah, so I was writing in this blog and explaining sort of what my experiences were like as a young adult with a rare type of cancer. And I ended up putting out a call to action asking for people to join me on the dance floor to do the twist. And within a couple days, there were a couple thousand people that were twisting out cancer. And it was very unexpected. But what it ended up happening was that I all of a sudden felt connected to people that were following along and cheering me on from afar. And, it was really, in some ways, that blog was my lifeline to the world around me. But it was also, in many ways, very isolating because I was looking at statistics and I didn't understand who these people were from these different countries that I had never been to or had no connection to. And I really wanted to see who these people were. And so it was quite powerful to put myself out there and just be really open and raw and vulnerable. And it's not like there was any real thought put into this homemade video that I made. I mean, it was very
Those are usually the ones that go viral, right?
right, right. And this is also, you have to remember, before you were paying for advertising and
Right.
things were just organically, going viral on their own. And so it was really interesting just to see people's support and people showing up for me. And I knew that if I got through treatment and was able to get better, that I wanted to be able to create that level of joy, but also most importantly, like a platform for people to be able to share their story and to feel comfortable sharing it. And so
Now,
I
did you
began,
have
yeah.
people like send you their videos of them doing the twist too?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow,
So
that's so
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, it was amazing. So I put out a video of me doing the twist and said who's joining me. They then submitted videos. A lot of the time they were posting it on Facebook and tagging me in it, or posting it on YouTube and then sharing it with me, or they were emailing it to me. And so when I was stuck in the hospital, all of a sudden I'm getting these like e-gifts, of people that are twisting out cancer. And it was like the most incredible thing to be able to see people dancing and being joyous and showing their support for me when I was really stuck.
I love that. And so how did that become what you're doing now? And maybe, I guess, share a little bit about what Twist Out Cancer does.
Yeah. Yeah. So Twist Out Cancer provides psychosocial support to individuals touched by cancer through creative arts programming. So everything is creative arts focused. And really at the heart of what we do is empower people to come forward with their stories. So for me, like I mentioned, that tendency to want to retreat, I think that's not a unique experience. I think that's a common feeling amongst people that have been diagnosed with cancer.
Mhm.
And what I've seen firsthand and what the research shows is that when you retreat and keep it inside and don't share it with people, it really prevents you from being able to open up and to heal. And so essentially at the heart of what we do is we create a safe place for people to feel comfortable sharing their story and knowing that their story deserves to be told and that people want and need to hear it. And so really what we're doing is focusing on creating and essentially people's we want them to feel empowered to be able to share it, but we also allow for them to see their story through someone else's eyes. So we have a program called Brushes with Cancer that matches artists with people that have been touched by cancer, and the artists create a work of art that's reflective of that person's journey with cancer. Their relationship develops over 6 months. I mean, it's not like they just wake up one day and paint a
Right.
picture. It's all about that relationship building, and it allows the person touched by cancer to share their story over a period of time, get to know the person, forge that connection with them, and figure out what is most important. What do they want that person to know? What do they want the public to know about their story? And so through those conversations, it allows them to kind of narrow in on their narrative and figure out what is that piece that's most important. And then having the artist articulate that through their art allows them to see their story through the artist's eyes. And it can be really powerful.
Wow. And so is it painting, sculptures, just whatever the artist does, or?
Any creative medium. Yeah. So we've had spoken word, we've had dance, we've had jewelry, we've had photography, all different types of things.
And how do you match an artist to a person touched by cancer?
Yeah. So we have an application process that's been devised by our clinical director. And it's a pretty lengthy, not too lengthy, but it asks some really pointed questions about personality and systems of support and what is motivating them to participate in the program on both sides. So we want to know, why is the artist coming to this program? What's motivating them? What are their experiences with cancer? It's not a requirement, but most of our artists have had some experience with cancer, whether it's their own or whether it's a family member or friend. Um, and we also want to make sure that our inspirations have adequate support outside of our program. That's really important too, because while there's aspects of art therapy that are involved in it, we cannot claim that this is a clinical program. It's not a therapist that's meeting with, someone that's in the throes of treatment, providing therapy. It really is about relationship building. And while we have art therapists on staff that implement programs and there's aspects of art therapy that are involved, the relationship between the artist and inspiration is really two peers that are getting to know each other. And so we want to really be clear about what the program is and what the program isn't. And then based on how the inspiration and artists respond, we then make meaningful matches based on things that we think resonate. And it becomes quite obvious to us. I mean, I've done this so many times now, and we just see different threads throughout people's applications that make it very clear to us, like who should be matched together. And it's been pretty remarkable to see how those matches not only have gone in along in the program, but where those relationships go beyond the program, sort of what those ripple effects are. It can be very profound.
And is there a place, like especially if it's visual art, that people can see this? Is it kind of
Mhm.
up to the person if they want to, share it and make it public or not?
Yeah, no. So all the art is exhibited at the end of the program. So when we have an open program, for example, like we have a call right now for our Philly-based program. It's you don't have to be in Philadelphia to participate, but the exhibition will take place in Philadelphia. That's a super important part of the process is being a
Okay.
part of this larger collective of stories and larger collective of work. Um, so yeah, so the artist will do a private reveal with we call them inspiration, the person that's been touched by cancer. They'll do a private reveal, but then there's an in-person event that focuses on storytelling and celebrating the journeys of our participants. And oftentimes, more recently, what we've been doing is working with galleries so that the exhibition is on display for an extended period. So you may come to an opening reception, which is one thing, but then we also have like the art on display for a month so that the public can actually access it.
So your programs are like specific times of the year or a specific length of time. Somebody can't just apply and get paired with an artist
Exactly.
at any time.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So there
Okay.
so the programs typically last about 6 months from start to finish. And so we have this one where we're accepting applications now for Philadelphia. But 2 weeks ago, we just wrapped our program in Glencoe, Illinois, just outside of Chicago at Writers Theater. So that was like culmination of a 6 month program. So yeah, we kind of stagger them out. And then we also work with private partners to create licensed opportunities. So in conjunction to these open programs that are open to the public for people to apply and participate in, we also run private programs with other institutions where we build a program that's customized to the needs of that partner, if that makes sense.
Okay. Awesome. Now, are you still is Twist Out Cancer kind of just now more the name and the background, or is there still a piece of that that is part of your organization?
Still just kind of it's where we started, right?
Right.
But it's really at the heart of what we're doing is brushes with cancer. And then we have another program called Twist Hearts and Twist Shops, which are art therapy based workshops run by art therapists that are 90-minute workshops, both in private, public, and in school settings,
Nice.
where we engage folks in like real art therapy. Yeah.
Wow. And now, are they just in Pennsylvania and Chicago, or do you
We're
have
all
them
over the
all over?
place. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So Twist shops are actually in a few hospitals in different locations. So we have two in Chicago. One is at Rush, the other is at Little Company and Mary. We're working on a contract with MD Anderson at Cooper, running Twist shops there. We've done one with them, but we're hoping to roll that out monthly. Northern Westchester, also in New York, is a client of ours too. So we've been building these larger relationships so that we can have more frequent art therapy programs. And it's great for hospitals that don't have art therapists on staff, where we're able to come in and provide that service. We have a long history of doing it now. It can be, and it's very easy for us to do because we have all these facilitators that are, able to do it all over the country. And also, I mean, some folks really do prefer virtual. And so we definitely have some facilitators that are running exclusively virtual workshops for folks that may not feel well enough to come into the hospital or just may want to do it from the comfort of their home.
So, can you tell us a little bit, just tell us a little bit about art therapy in hospital settings for patients, and think for people who it might not be available in their area, they might not even know that it exists. So,
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about what that encompasses?
Yeah. So art therapy is not crafting. I just want to put that out there. Sometimes people think like we're just going to run an arts and crafts.
Scrapbooking.
Yeah, that's not what we do. There's always a prompt or a directive and a certain goal that we're trying to achieve through the actual session. So we will focus on topics like grief, anxiety, sexual health after cancer, Could also be on building community, all different things. So the topics are set in advance between the art therapist and the institution that we're working with. And the goal is for individual processing, but also for group processing. So we create art, and the art, it doesn't really matter what you're creating. It's not about creating the most beautiful work of art, and it's not about creating something that's going to be displayed. It's about thinking about what is coming up for you in the process as you're creating. What is it that you might be sharing with others during the session that you may never have shared before? Some folks are very communicative, others are much more reserved, and sometimes they'll start out reserved and then come back to the session. At Rush, like we're doing it monthly, so we have some regulars that are coming back that will start off super quiet and then open up with the group later on. And I think what's really interesting is that by using materials and using your hands, it almost it tears away at sort of the guard that we have up, right? The way that I think about it is almost like when you go to a cocktail party, like why people go and get a glass of wine or why they're eating, right? It allows you to sort of like not only take the edge off, but it gives you something to do so that when you're talking to someone, like it's just, there's not as much pressure. And I would say that when you're using materials, it really can allow for an unusual conversations come up as a result of it. It takes people out of their comfort zone. And as a result, I think people are more willing to open up and really be honest about their experiences. So it can be quite beautiful.
And are there lots of different media, in the space? So if people want to draw or paint or color or, sculpt or whatever.
Definitely. Yeah. We come with all of our supplies too. So
Okay.
we bring a lot of things. And for virtual folks, we'll also send out a list of suggested supplies. Some of the time we ship supplies out and then they're dispersed. So it comes in all different sizes. But yes, there's always a myriad of materials to use.
Okay. Wow. I'm not generally a creative mind, so this is all very fascinating to me. When I was going through my own journey, like the idea of doing something like this just never would have even occurred to me. Hence why I started a podcast. So because I like to talk. I guess we all have our own ways of dealing with it and getting through it. So
Yes.
that's fascinating. I love that. And I love that you're getting into more and more hospitals and institutions where you can really meet the people where they are versus, hoping that they find you kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, that's fantastic. So what advice would you give to somebody who is kind of just starting on a journey with cancer or coming out of it and trying to figure out what's next for them?
So, I mean, obviously I would say don't retreat and talk to someone. And that someone could be your best friend. It could be a parent. It could be a social worker. It could be someone that just has to be someone that you trust so that you're not carrying your burden alone. I think that is super important. And I think also, I mean, if it's not just one person, sort of being selective about how you build your squad of people that can really be there to support you. I found personally that I needed to connect with other people that had experienced cancer while I was going through it and even afterwards. Because, listen, I was 29 years old and I didn't know anyone that looked like me that had experienced what I had experienced at 29. And so finding other people, other young adults that had gone through cancer, it didn't have to be the same type because that I knew it was kind of a lost cause, but had gone through fertility treatment, had gone through chemo, had gone through survivorship. That was really important for me to be able to connect with folks like that. And so I started to find that I had a group of friends that were my cancer friends, and then I had a group of friends that were my old friends. And it took me a while to be able to feel like I could reconnect with my old friends because I had been so profoundly changed by the experience. eventually I was able to get back in and fall back into sync. But it was a lot. It was a lot. And so I think being able to confide in someone or a group of people that understand your experiences is super important.